Hello, I'm Immadreygon, and of all Pixar's films, this one seems to be, strangely, not discussed as often. Remy is a rat. An artisanal rat. Unlike the rest of his colony, he's got a passion for food, something that's not understood around other rats. He also has an apparition of Gusteau, a famous, and dead, chef, talking to him. Problems come, he's separated from the colony and finds his way to Paris. After fixing a soup in Gusteau's old kitchen, he cooperates with Linguini, a generally inept person who stumbled his way into becoming a chef at that kitchen. And that's the concept. As far as the actual story goes, there's Remy rebelling against being the standard rat, Linguini inheriting the restaurant because he's Gusteau's son, despite Chef Skinner's attempts to cover that up, and a brutal critic, Ego, who has it out for the restaurant. And that is one of the reasons why I love this film. With a lot of Pixar's other works, it's pretty streamlined, with most of the focus being on a main pair or main group. And while Ratatouille isn't really an exception, the two are from entirely different worlds, barely able to communicate. There's a dynamic between the two, but that mostly comes out in Linguini's jerky movements when being piloted, and some one-sided quote-unquote dialogues.
I'm not ambitious. I wasn't trying to cook. I was just trying to stay out of trouble. You're the one who was getting fancy with the spices.
This opens up a ton more threads, like the fact that being a rat in a kitchen is not only entertaining because, ha ha, he's a rat, he doesn't belong there, but also that it's really, really dangerous for him. As opposed to the Pixar standard where two characters go on a road trip, meaning they are largely removed from the supporting cast, or just come into contact with them for a scene or two, there is a single main location here, the kitchen, allowing for a lot more intimacy between them. This isn't a world that we need to deeply explore every single facet of. It's just present-day Paris. A beautiful city, mind you, but one that we're already kind of familiar with, even if you haven't been there. It's much more the characters that we get to spend our time exploring. And speaking of, there is not a single lackluster character here. The kitchen staff all have brief but colorful introductions.
I killed a man with this thumb.
Chef Skinner does well as your standard worm in man's clothing, presumably actually knowing about cooking, but selling out big time.
Gusteau's corn puppies.
They're like corn dogs, only smaller. Bite size.
The apparition of Gusteau is pretty entertaining, especially when commenting about how he isn't even real.
How could you not know this?
I am a figment of your imagination. You did not know, how could I?
And Remy and Linguini are both compelling enough, where one is living his best life, which actively wants to kill him, and the other is desperately hiding the secret that nearly nobody is even suspicious of. And the one who is suspicious is treated like a lunatic because of it. After all, who would have a scooter chase through Paris after a rat stealing legal papers? Regardless, my two favorite characters are, without a doubt, Colette and Ego. Colette is the more well-rounded character, with several standout moments since her first scene when she first stands up for Linguini after he changed the soup.
You can fire him.
What?
Leclerc likes it, yeah? She made a point of telling you so.
Honestly, that alone is enough to make me like her. Then you add in the scene about being the toughest chef in the kitchen tips, especially not being mommy,
Every second counts and you cannot be mommy!
and the fact that she comes back in the end despite the insanity that is, well, this, and you have a well-rounded yet well-defined character. It is clear that she's got an incredible passion for this work, but recognizes that it is, in fact, work. In any other film, she is the standout character. But this isn't any other film, and to nobody's surprise, my favorite character is Anton Ego. He only really shows up about halfway through the film for really just a few scenes, but my god, those scenes. There's more minute details and love poured into his maybe 15 minutes of total screen time than any comparable character. His studio is in the shape of a coffin, his typewriter a skull, and the low angles that he's often shot at make him more menacing than his magnificent character design and dialogue alone. His words ooze of disdain, and it looks as if he's positioned as a malcontent of the food world, having nothing nice to say at all. Ever.
Gusteau has finally found his rightful place in history, right alongside another equally famous chef. Monsieur Boyardee.
Touché.
He straight up refers to himself as an opponent in cooking.
Game?
Yes, and you've been playing without an opponent.
What does that even mean? Regardless, the entirety of this melts away in an instant in the final 5 minutes of the film, and the best 5 minutes of the film. The little flashback thing is very nice, but what really does it for me is how he drops his pen. Now, this is a pretty standard way to show surprise in a character, but let me let you in on a little bit of a secret. When I review a film, I always watch it multiple times. How this usually goes, I'll watch it once straight through to get a first impression, or a fresh impression I should say. I've probably seen it before. Then another time through while taking notes for my script, somewhat of a third time through for only specific scenes, and often enough, a fourth time just to establish that my opinion has stuck, and tweaking the script as needed in response to that. Now, when a film is particularly good, that second time through starts to last quite a while, because I get so enamored with whatever's happening on screen that I cannot focus on critique, just on my own enjoyment, and I'll need to rewind in order to focus and make notes. And that is what just happened, because Ego isn't the malcontent of the food world. His brutally high standards are entirely sincere, and not posturing at being smarter or above it all. After quickly realizing how good the dish is, he goes all in on it, and his flip takes him no time whatsoever. Skinner, on the other hand, who has the same food, denies it briefly before lashing out in anger.
Who cooks the ratatouille?
Because food was, to him, ironically, a way to feed his ego, whereas food to ego is his raison d'etre. And all of this is before we get to his closing speech where he remains just as sincere, steadfast in the face of inevitable consequences, and all of those words I've very much taken to heart. It's part of the reason why I much prefer talking about things I enjoy a lot more than things I don't, and why I select my videos as such. It's the reason I try to avoid the words overrated and underrated, as if my opinion on the matter has any effect on the actual quality of the work. It's why I admit my true feelings about anything that I watch, even if that's not the correct opinion. Because the best work I could ever do as a critic is in that exact vein, always being honest, yet at the same time, avoiding negativity. Usually. Ego's not wrong. It's fun to write and to read, so every now and then I like to take a stab at it. But so rarely is a bad experience in entertainment ever transformative like a good one can be. Because I can ramble forever about how Shark Tale is bad, the fish look dumb, and people can laugh and say, my gosh, he's so right, beating that dead horse. But I did not start this channel to beat dead horses. I started it because I wanted to connect with people through my favorite form of entertainment. And nobody going to the castle to kill the beast had as significant a connection as the only two trying to save him. Along with their assorted furnishings, of course. And that's why I think this final scene is the most uplifting that Pixar has ever done, certainly, and possibly any animation studio. I cannot rave enough about this ending, and everything before that is quite good as well. And keep in mind, I've only talked about the characters so far, and through them, the themes and some slight humor. And with maybe a minute left in this video's runtime and the 20 seconds or so dedicated to credits, that just shows how much weight I put on the character work in this film. There are other things worth mentioning too, of course, like how Le Festin is delightful, and I think this was a turning point in Pixar's abilities to animate humans. The improvement between The Incredibles and this is about the same in my eyes as the improvement between this and Incredibles 2. That and all of this food looks so good. It almost made me forget that Ratatouille itself is usually made with a tomato base for long enough for me to want to try it. Poisoning myself with tomatoes. Huh. Always remember, vegetables call tomatoes fruits because they're actually a fruit. And fruits call them vegetables because they're tomatoes, they're vile, and nobody loves them. Next time, we'll be talking about some of the best, but also strangest, of friends.